Hey guys, so when I started this Ritual League, I didn't really have a build idea. I just wanted to play with Mjolnir and Battlemage, and I planned the build basically in like 10 minutes before the league launch. So I know my luck. I know how much budget I generate at the start of the league. So I kind of planned the build with my budget in mind. And if you're like me and don't have big budget to start the league, for example, or just even still right now don't have a big budget and want to play something with Mjolnir, something that is very well rather simple, pleasant to map clear, and not really trying to like push into very end game content, then this build can work. But if you're looking for a build that can do like end game content, like the highest end game content, like Cirrus and like 10 bosses and stuff like that, then this is not the right build. I'm saying this in advance because some people may get disappointed. I matched it to my budget basically. So why Battle Mage? It's just a new thing, and actually Battle Mage doesn't really give me anything that new. It's just a bit more flat damage, which is actually physical, which is not great for Inquisitor. The build works pretty well. There are a couple more things I could improve, but it's not gonna be enough for like truly endgame content. But it was clearing even retail maps just fine. It's just fighting bigger bosses is a bit difficult. If you're talking about what kind of budget you need to start this build, Mjolnir is like 2 or 3 years. Impulse is not required, but is very helpful. When I was buying Impulse, it was 80 years, but now I believe it's like 30 years or something like that. So it's pretty cheap, and other than that, you don't need anything too specific. There are lots of items that you can and probably eventually will want to improve a bit, but the ceiling of the damage is pretty limited. I was actually thinking of doing a separate video about the Battle Mage and all the build ideas that came up during the stream, but when I thought about it more, it would mostly be naming just items that can give you a lot of damage to spells and nothing too spectacular. So I'm gonna mention a couple items that could be interesting for Battle Mage. So if you got some ideas for the Battle Mage, please let me know because I'm very curious. I may actually do another build with the Battle Mage very soon. So leave them in the comments below. So a couple ideas. Actually, I wrote it down. You can read it faster and skip it. So Hydra Sphere cannot be used to proc Mjolnir despite how Hydra Sphere works. You can actually hit the Hydra Sphere and like generate power charges and frenzy charges and generate rage, but it doesn't work to proc Mjolnir for some reason. Now Vulcanus Dagger, actually Vulcanus Dagger is pretty interesting because it does have pretty high base damage. So with Battle Mage you would copy this damage and add it to your spells, but it also has some conditional things that can be interesting, like up to 100% increased fire damage with hits and ailments against bleeding enemies, and you can inflict bleeding with attacks. It does have a rotational avatar of fire. So every 8 seconds you're gonna get Avatar of Fire for 4 seconds, during which you will not be able to bleed. I did a couple of builds with Vulcanus in the past, and it's really strong dagger. So Vulcanus with the Battle Mage could be very interesting. Next one is Martyr of Innocence. Martyr of Innocence is, I would say, not too interesting. By the way, Wiki is outdated. Martyr of Innocence now has Battle Mage on the staff, so you don't need to be Inquisitor. It basically lost this part, but now it has Battle Mage, which basically copies this part. It's like a buff to the Matter of Innocence in the recent patch. So this also has a lot of flat base damage, which could be used as a spellcaster, and it does have fire penetration if you have blocked recently. So it could be used both as an attack build and as a spellcaster. White Wind Dagger is probably one of my favorite daggers for some reason. I don't know why, I just like daggers. It also has a lot of base damage. This one gives cold, but you cannot use, well, I guess it does want to incentivize you to not use a shield or dual wield. And you can go without a shield, and then you would get up to 200% increased cold damage while your offhand is empty. Also get up to 25% chance to dodge attack hits while your offhand is empty. So it could be an idea. Now next, Deburn's Dirge is an axe. It also does have big flat damage, but you're also getting up to 150% increased elemental damage if you have used a Warcry recently. And you can just use this as a spellcaster as well. You just work right, you get 150% increased elemental damage and a lot of flare damage. But the question is, do these kind of weapons outdamage the usual spellcaster weapons, like let's say a staff, like +2 staff with a bunch of crit chance, crit multi, and spell damage and something like that? It probably doesn't, but it's an option if you want to play like a hybrid attack spellcaster. Now, Disintegrator is another idea, but I want to quickly mention Disintegrator. It's very similar to Martyr of Innocence. However, this part will not scale with the Battlemage. Adds physical damage to attacks and spells per ciphering charge. I mean, it will add to spells, but it will not double dip. The one that is added to attacks is not going to be added again through the Battlemage, because all the conditional things don't work with Battlemage. So what you see here is what you're gonna get as a flat bonus from the Battlemage. Now, Harbinger Sword, I actually can't remember the name. Harbinger Sword is a one-handed weapon which also procs like a lightning cascade thing, like 2 times per second on hit. No wait, not on hit, on when you attack, which doesn't work with challenging skills that well. But it also gives it's decent flat physical damage, and it also has like spell damage. It also has damage to spells, so it could be maybe used as well. But then again, do you really want to replace a typical spellcaster weapon? Joffrey's Devotion is interesting. Joffrey's Devotion procs Elemental Warding, and Elemental Warding is it's a projectile nova. It shoots projectiles in a nova. It does have very high base damage, which is physical converted into random element, but you cannot crit with it. It also does have pretty decent base damage, not the most amazing one. That damage would also be added to the elemental warding, so this would be increased by another 400 flare damage. Anyway, not to drag this video too long, let's move on. I'm gonna try to make this kind of short, but also give some information to players who are struggling with damage and how to increase that damage, because all the small items with a bit of damage just all add up into like quite noticeable amount of more damage. So the main thing is Mjolnir. Inside Mjolnir I have Shock Nova, Concentrated Effect, and increased critical damage. You don't want Elemental Focus if you're using Inpulsa, because you want to be able to shock enemies. So Inpulsa is also very important, but it's also cheap. You can get it for like 30 years. Actually, I haven't checked the price. The last time I checked, the price was 30 years, and I bought it for 80 years. So the price kept dropping, I guess. Inside Inpulsa, I have Cyclone linked to Castword Channeling, Bollighting, Slaughter Projectiles, and Control Destruction. And also that's why Cyclone is not really gonna be doing much damage, because it's mostly for spells. But also you may want to experiment with Arc. Arc is also getting extra chain from Mjolnir, so it may be worth using Arc. I actually have Arc. You may want to use Arc, and instead of Slaughter Projectiles, use like added lightning damage or something like that. Even Awaken added lightning damage would be great. Now for the helmet, actually there's a new base helmet type, Blizzard Crown, which does give a lot of cold damage. And this cold damage is added to everything. I think it should also be adding damage even to heralds, because it does not say specifically to spells or attacks, so it should be adding to everything. The drawback is not even a drawback for Inquisitor, because you are ignoring enemy elemental resistance when you crit, so this is not even a drawback. So this is a perfect crown for Inquisitor. On the helmet, you're gonna want to increase your accuracy as much as possible, because if you're not hitting, then you're not proccing Mjolnir, and that's a big damage loss. So you want to reach, ideally you would want to have 100% accuracy, but it's pretty difficult to do that. So you want as much accuracy on the helmet, and also gloves and amulet. Helmet, gloves, and amulet can have a lot of accuracy. You can also get accuracy on rings, but on rings you may want other things. Now on amulet you're also gonna want either spell damage, lightning damage, critical strike multiplier, and obviously life, or maybe even attack speed. You're gonna want a bit more attack speed. I'm currently almost reaching the cap rate when I get Onslaught and when I summon Ancestral Protector. I almost reached the cap rate, and the cap rate is 150 milliseconds, which is 6.67 attacks per second, or procs per second. So you need to match your attack speed to be that much. So on rings you're just gonna match your resistances. You're also gonna want leech probably. You can get leech on amulet and rings, but on amulet you're probably gonna want damage, and on rings you usually just get life and resistances, which leaves more room for leech. On gloves, like I said, attack speed, ideally would be attack speed, accuracy, and then life resistances, something else, or maybe like conversion if you can, but if you cannot, just try to get at least accuracy. On boots, also match your resistances if you need extra strength or intelligence or something like that. Now on belt you can actually use Darkness Enthroned. This was the last change I did to this build at like level 8 and 9. I decided to just go another mile and get a bit more damage, just tiny bit more damage. So Darkness Enthroned buffs jewels inside it by 75%, which is quite massive. You're gonna try to get flare damage, critical multiplier, or like double flare damage and life. You're also gonna want large cluster jewel for mace or scepters, and it has Overlord, which actually is pretty rare mod to get, and there may not be many jewels like that on sale, so you may have to craft it yourself. And this one does give Fortify on melee hit with mace or scepter. So as soon as you hit, you get Fortify for 6 seconds, which is very nice. So you don't need to use Fortify support, and Fortify is pretty important. You may not need Fortify early on when you're destroying everything and not really getting hit that much, but it makes you take less hit damage. I have Blind on hit and Onslaught on kill jewel, which basically doesn't have any more damage, but it is, I guess, an extra defensive layer. You blind enemies. You also curse them with Enfeeble, which lowers their accuracy even more. So you kind of can be a bit tanky. I am also using Vitality. I actually use Vitality, I think, since Act 3, and I kept using it. Did I mention shield? On a shield you want all the damage you can get, and also some life and resistance. So like lightning damage, spell damage, crit chance for spell, something like that. And on boots, did I mention on boots? I'm recording this the second time, so I'm not entirely sure what I already said. Now the other gems that I'm using: Flame Dash linked with Arcane Surge level 1, and also Steel Skin. Steel Skin is on left click. I don't often trigger it because most of the time I'm just cycloning and not really clicking left button, but you can actually bind it on other button and just activate while cycloning, but I just keep it on the left click because, well, eventually I'm gonna need to move and just proc it without thinking. Now Flame Dash and Steel Skin is also gonna proc Arcane Surge, which is gonna give you more spell damage for a couple of seconds. Then I also have Ancestral Protector. It's important to have Culling Strike somewhere, so I had room linked it with Culling Strike. Also have Cast when Damage Taken linked with Enfeeble, but you could go with like self-casting Assassin's Mark if you want more damage, or maybe even get Assassin's Mark on hit ring. I decided to be a bit more tanky and die less, I guess. Then I'm still using Hell Defies. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but I like having extra explosions. So I also have Vengeance because when enemies hit me, the Vengeance procs, and it also procs Mjolnir. Also have Valrighteous Fire linked with increased duration, and Frostbomb. Frostbomb is not for the damage, but it is to... Maven sometimes buffs bosses and gives them regen, and if you use Frostbomb, you're gonna reduce their regen by 75%, which is actually pretty useful. Now, I mentioned that you may be lacking damage. You may be having like a lot of jewels with just like 1 damage mod. If you, let's say, have 5 or 4 jewels with just 1 damage mod and life, when you upgrade each of them to have 2 damage mods and life, you're gonna get an extra like 40-50% increased damage. Then you can benchcraft rings, amulet, or even like gloves for extra damage. You can also obviously increase your accuracy and increase your attack speed, so you would proc more frequently. Maybe your damage is low because you're not proccing enough. Maybe your attack speed is too low and your accuracy is too low, so you're actually missing. Also, Cyclone is great because it does give you more attack speed. Well, not really more attack speed, but the base attack speed for Cyclone is 300% of base. So look at my attack speed with no default attacks. See how slow it is? It's super slow. And that feels horrible if you use it with other skills. So initially I was using Static Strike because you hit once and then for like 4 seconds you can run around and just zap enemies. But it was so clunky and Cyclone felt so much better. So if you're not using Cyclone, just use Cyclone. You're not gonna regret it. Okay, so let's talk about the passive tree then. So from the passive tree, I would recommend to take Instrument of Virtue at the start. No matter what weapon you are using, you're gonna add some flare damage to your spells and level with spells. don't level with attacks. I would recommend going with the Bollighting, get the Tabula Bollighting and just go all the way until like level 60 plus. I believe I equipped Mjolner at level 61. As soon as I did that, my damage was lower than with Bollighting, so you may want to play with Bollighting and finish Act 10 with Bollighting. And then switch to Mjolner. And then go for Righteous Providence, start building more crit chance on the passive tree, and then eventually take Inevitable Judgment. And then start ignoring enemy resistances. And then from Overlap take this one, just a bit more elemental mitigation and more elemental damage to enemies. The rest of the passive skill tree, well, as you can see, is basically following this path. You're gonna want accuracy, you're gonna want dex, so kind of gonna have to take that. You may not need this, but this also gives strength and int, which is also crit chance and also gives regen and a bit more armor increase. You're also gonna go through here and pick both because you're both spellcaster and attack, and this one also gives strength and int, which is also crit. And yeah, just travel all the way up. You're gonna probably want to pick up either all of these early on to increase your damage, or just this smaller one if you're playing with Bollighting. And then you're going up, start grabbing crit chance, going to the witch, more crit chance, more life, more strength and dex. That's when you start actually critting and benefiting from crit more. Then you actually may want to consider replacing controlled destruction if you're using it with some links, and replacing with like either idolighting, critical damage multiplier support, or maybe even elemental focus until you get Inpulsa's broken heart. On a small cluster rituals, it doesn't matter what you add, you basically want overload. Depends on what you need. Do you feel swishy, get more damage, get more life. If you feel like you are tank enough, get more damage. Initially I thought that I would get bored of this build even faster, because I normally like play one build for like 4 days and then move on to the next one, but this is already 6 days, created almost 7 days ago. So I've been playing this build for longer than normally and was having a lot of fun. Unlocked more maps, got a bit of currency. Now I can start making some more silly builds. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.